Since 1992, Carolina International Trucks and Idea Lease has supported commercial trucking with our 6 South Carolina locations, serving all makes and models of commercial trucks. We want to thank the hard-working heroes of the trucking industry. From drivers to technicians, these dedicated workers are the backbone of our communities, transporting and distributing supplies and food that otherwise would not be delivered. At Carolina International Trucks and Idea Lease, we encourage you to thank a trucker and show them your support today. Trucking moves America forward.
Okay, good morning. Hi, I'm Rick Todd, live here from our studios in the W.T. Castle's conference room in our, in our office headquarters right here on Divine Street in downtown Columbia, South Carolina, conveniently situated about a mile from our capital. This virtual series has been themed Essential Association. And once again, it's been confirmed beyond a doubt that the trucking industry is the critical link in our nation's supply chain. So it's critical that we have sound and solid research that is focused on our biggest issues and challenges. That shapes policy, and that provides a roadmap for timely and expertly applied advocacy. That's why associations are essential. To further showcase that, we have a panel entitled Trucking Toward a New Reality. So what does our future and our operations look like post-COVID? Well, to lead this discussion, we have one of our favorites, Rebecca Brewster. Rebecca is President and Chief Operating Officer of and a 25-year veteran of the American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI, as we call it. ATRI is the industry's not-for-profit research organization, primarily focusing on improving our safety and our productivity. She is a very active speaker, spokesperson for the industry, and has been recognized in a bunch of different, very prominent ways, including Fleet Owner Magazine's dozen outstanding women in trucking and influential women in trucking. And the one I would submit she's probably most proud of is the J.R. Bob Halliday Award given by the 50 state trucking associations, our peer group. Early in Rebecca's career, she was Public and Government Affairs Director for the Cary, North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, later a fleet analyst with Moen. Rebecca has a BA in English from Wofford, and is a fellow at the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership. Rebecca is based in Atlanta. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you, Rick.
And joining Rebecca is our own Casey Odell. Casey's Safety Director with Belue Trucking in Spartanburg. She proudly manages 80 drivers. And before that, Casey spent 5 years as a mortgage underwriter in Charlotte. Then she returned to her trucking roots, rejoining the family business at Belue. Casey holds a BA in business marketing from Winthrop. She is very active with SETA, including serving on our annual conference planning committee. She has just recently chaired the Safety Management Council. And of note, Casey is the first female chairperson of our truck driving championship. So Casey, we're glad to have you here. And we have Jamie Lillis, who is a Southeast Flex driver for Cardinal Logistics. Jamie started his driving career as an 88M motor transport operator for the Connecticut National Guard. He was deployed overseas to Afghanistan for 2 years, driving to and from different forwarding operating bases carrying supplies. He earned his CDL in 2013. After his military obligations officially ended in 2018, he went to work for Lowe's delivering building materials. 4 years ago, Jamie joined Cardinal Logistics for Home Depot delivery, then became a Northeastern Flex driver. And within a year and a half and 11 different accounts all over the country, he's now a Southeast Flex driver. Jamie lives in Naugatuck, Connecticut. Did I get that right, Jamie?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you in your truck?
Yeah, I'm actually in another truck. I had to get flown up here to Rhode Island to help out with another account.
Okay,
my truck's down in South Carolina right now.
Well, we appreciate what you do, and thank you for taking time out to be with us, and the same to all of you. So welcome. We look forward to the discussion, and Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it. And I'm really pleased today to have Casey and Jamie with me to talk about really what the trucking industry has experienced during this pandemic, but probably more important, how can we take those lessons learned and move forward toward, as we coined in the phrase, a new reality. So I'm going to share my screen and share with you just a few of our research findings first, and then we'll have Casey and Jamie react to some of that and engage a little more in a conversation. Early on, when the pandemic started and we saw what was going to be unfolding for us, or as we imagined what would be unfolding for us, at ATRI we decided there was going to be no greater opportunity than the present to really undertake some research and figure out what these impacts would be for the trucking industry. And so working with our partners at the OIDA Foundation, in mid-March, we launched a survey for the trucking industry to really gauge what people, boots on the ground, drivers and fleet operators were experiencing and what they were thinking the future would look like. We had a tremendous response. I wasn't sure, I have to be honest with you, when we launched this survey, I wasn't sure people would be able to take the time, because they were so busy reacting to the pandemic, that they would take the time to do the survey. But in just over 2 weeks, we had over 5,000 responses, which was tremendous for us. One of our best survey responses ever. You can see that 77% of the respondents were professional drivers. A large portion of those respondents were also folks from smaller fleets, 50 or fewer trucks. And about 65% of those folks were in the truckload sector of the industry. And just a couple of those findings, if I can figure out how to advance my slide. There we go. So we ask about average length of haul before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And as you can see, we saw some drop off among respondents on those longer long haul trips, 1,000 miles or more per trip, but a more than doubling of the percentage of folks who said that they were running many more local trips, 100 miles per or less per trip. So a real uptick in those last mile delivery activities and servicing from grocery store distribution centers to grocery stores as we saw many Americans stock up on everything they needed to get through this, including apparently toilet paper, the critical item for everybody. And those stay-at-home orders had a real impact on our transportation infrastructure. And ATRI is very fortunate to have a truck GPS data set that has over 1 million commercial vehicles represented in it. And you're hopefully familiar with our annual list of the top truck bottlenecks. And so we wanted to look at some of those bottlenecks and see what difference it made to have everybody who drives a car staying at home in those shelter-in-place orders while trucks were still doing what trucks do. And so we looked at 4 different top truck bottlenecks, and the one on the left is one most folks are familiar with around here. That's Spaghetti Junction here in Atlanta, where I-285 and I-85 intersect. And we compared the same week in March, the third week in March, from 2018, 2019, and then 2020. And what you can see is truck speeds greatly increased during March of 2020 because they were the only ones on the road. The the afternoon rush hour, you can see speeds are down around 14 or 15 miles per hour at a location that is posted at 55. And during the third week in March of this year, trucks were able to go 55 miles per hour. Average speeds were about 55 miles per hour. So real significant differences there in terms of efficiency for the supply chain. And to corroborate that, we saw in our survey, 87% of our respondents said that they were experiencing reduced traffic congestion as a result of the pandemic. But there were some changes, and not all of them were good. Not all of them were silver linings like less congestion. We asked respondents in the survey about changes to freight levels. And as you can see, depending on what sector of the industry you are in, those impacts were fairly dramatic. You can see among specialized fleets, 46% said that the freight levels were much lower now as a result of the pandemic. Typically, those are tanker fleets that haul fuel, and as all the cars were off the road, there was a lot less fuel being consumed. It also had a disparate impact, more so on smaller fleets. So you can see that those much lower freight levels were most significantly experienced by fleets of 50 or fewer trucks, whereas at the other end of the continuum, the freight levels were about the same or maybe even possibly higher among larger fleets. And then what do you think is going to be happening over the next several months? Well, while 41% of respondents said they thought it would be about the same, and again, this survey was in March, a higher percentage combined of folks thought it was going to be much worse or somewhat worse. And so not a promising outlook on the part of our respondents for what the future would look like as we went through this pandemic. And once again, using that truck GPS data set, we were able to corroborate what our respondents felt. We looked at truck activity. So truck activity is measured by the GPS movement of trucks across the entire state. And I've got a couple state examples here, but they pretty much follow the same pattern, where from February 9th through the early weeks of March, you see an uptick in truck activity, more pronounced here on the left in Washington state than in Texas. But then in both of those states, you see a dramatic drop off. So as businesses shuttered, all the businesses that we service in the trucking industry were closed and did not need freight delivery, you can see that truck activity dropped dramatically. And we saw this really across all the states we looked at, more pronounced in some states than others. For instance, Ohio, which has a large manufacturing base, saw a bigger drop than did Washington state, which we just saw previously. When we, and I realize I should have included it, when we looked at Michigan, which is very heavily into automobile manufacturing, which was all shuttered, the drop-off was even more precipitous. But there were some good bright spots. You can see in both of the examples here, Ohio and New York, at the very tail of our analysis, later weeks in April, truck activity started to pick up. So some hope on the way. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute, and I'm going to turn to Casey and Jamie, who have the real world experience. I've got the data to back up what they say, but Casey, I'll go to you first. Sort of what did your fleet experience in terms of freight levels and congestion, some of the findings that we found in our data? What did you experience during those first 2 months, really, March and April?
For March and April, our freight levels dropped a little bit, but it was more so of an unbalance where we try to keep our front hauls to match our back hauls. All of a sudden, we're doing a lot more deadheading to Atlanta to get the loads. So we still ran about the same miles, but the actual I guess revenue coming from it was not there. But we had to keep the same amount of drivers because we had to still go get the loads, still had the same amount of mileage, but that was where we saw the biggest difference. We didn't necessarily have, some of our customers didn't stop at all. I mean, there wasn't a slowdown at all. we do haul toilet paper, so there's that. So that kept us busy. I had to warn my drivers not to get hijacked, but we that was the biggest difference on our end. And as far as congestion, Atlanta is one of our hot spots. We run Atlanta to Charlotte, up and down 85 and down 26. And the drivers that hate going to Atlanta were saying, I'll go to Atlanta any day of the week with the quarantine traffic. So that's a change now, but at the time, yeah, they had seen a big difference, and I saw a difference on their call-ins to me as far as log issues, traffic issues, anything like that. There was a drastic difference with them needing me. So, and I can already tell that's picked up. They need me more now, so that's always good.
And Jamie, what about your experience on the road during those first couple of months, March and April?
First couple of months, as far as freight and everything goes, it started out okay, and it just slowly, gradually started transitioning into, where to park at night, where are we picking up our next load? Are we sitting at a customer for, about 8 to 12 hours or a full day, just kind of waiting on another load. As far as that, trying to find a truck spot, because you try to go to a truck stop, all packed, they're all packed on the fuel island. Times where freight was paying about $1 a month.
Had a thing in our lives, but among smaller fleets than among larger fleets. And I think that's a real important takeaway for us going forward.
I don't think she was happy with me for a little bit. Disposable gloves, I mean, we just constantly put it out in the driver's room, and still are. They are still taking them. And I think that a lot of, I've had a lot of comments like, that they're not using that much hand sanitizer, but if they're taking it home to their families, then it's still protecting them. So it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. So as long as they're using it, if they're selling it, whatever, I don't even want to know. But that's been the biggest thing that we've had to learn how to do, is how to protect them in the most simple way that I never thought I'd have an issue with.
Right, and it's very different. I mean, the trucking industry has always been held up and highlighted in our response to weather events, when there have been hurricanes or other tornadoes, floods, whatever, where we're those first folks in to do the disaster recovery and help communities rebuild. But that's a very different thing. One, it's a very short, sort of acute situation, where this is more of a chronic situation. But it also doesn't a very different approach than what we've experienced in the past. Jamie, what was your experience on the road going into customer facilities? Because Casey raised a great issue. It's a real conflict between, health privacy requirements on the part of employers and those of us who have to service those facilities, wanting to make sure we're not going to encounter someone who is sick.
Going into a lot of the shippers, the receivers, a lot of them didn't want you to enter the building. A lot of it was done through they'd leave a phone number up, call this number. They'd give you instructions on what time to back, what dock to back into. Also, wearing gloves. Some shippers, receivers, you have to wear gloves, full face mask. Some of them, they had hand sanitizers going in and out of the building. They wanted you to sanitize. Sometimes multiple times within the visit. It would either be at the door or, going to pick up your paperwork. And then some would even just throw your paperwork in the back of the door, away you went. Adjusting, on the fly. I had to get together a lot of, face masks, gloves, hand sanitizers. I needed to also adjust like my home time. I have a lot of family, spread out. So, we obviously had plans to do things. And so I volunteered to stay on the road longer instead of go home and risk, possibly contracting the virus or spreading the virus if I picked it up. Disinfecting the truck. I would do that constantly, going in and out of different shippers and receivers. That's pretty much my experience there on the fly.
And Casey, did you have any instances of drivers who became sick on the road that you had to deal with? Because we have heard about fleets who have had to deal with that, and sort of where do you have that driver shelter in place while they're out on the road?
Luckily, we didn't. Out of 80 plus drivers, we didn't have anyone that ended up getting sick from it. What I did do, just because it was such a long time that before you showed symptoms that you could have been positive or carrying, we had a few drivers call in sick, just for whatever reason, but any of those drivers that called in sick, I had my little journal and immediately wrote down what their symptoms were that they told me what they had done. And then I went back 2 weeks and traced every location they had been. For what purpose, I don't know yet, but I was wanting to track, to do some form to see if there was a correlation with customers or, and I wanted to make sure that if they did end up testing positive 7 days after they called in, then we would know that and be able to get with other drivers that had gone into that truck after, because we slip seat. That was the only way I could know how to handle it. But there again, we didn't have anybody test positive. So, and there was one driver who his wife worked at a jail where there was an outbreak, and so I just stuck him on that journal too. No,
I think that's great. And I mean, one of the things that you hear the medical experts talk about is the need to do contact tracing when we do have a positive incident. So, I mean, you were one of the early ones doing that contact tracing because you were keeping a journal. And that's the sort of lesson learned that I think is so valuable going forward. You know, everything from a simple journal, just keeping track of where your drivers have been in the case that they do get sick. Taryn, I'm going to pull you in here because I think this is a great opportunity as a great opportunity for the state trucking associations, for whom many of their members are those mid-size and smaller fleets, to really take the lessons learned, the experiences of Casey and Jamie and your other members, and really start to help folks plan going forward. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things that SCTA did during the first couple of months?
Well, any of our members will tell you that we probably over-communicated. We spent a lot of time trying to boil down all of the information into the basic necessities that our members would need, from the executive orders to oversized overweight permits to CDC guidelines, business policies, et cetera, just trying to make sure that they had a clear picture without having to do a lot of searching themselves. So we went from a daily communication from pretty regularly for the first couple of weeks into spacing it out. And now we kind of wrap it up about once every week and a half, depending on what comes in and what changes are occurring. We also started a safety council meetup every Friday so that peers could get on, ask us questions, us discuss any changes from executive orders on down, bring in guest speakers throughout FMCSA, ATA, State Transport Police, et cetera. So we were over communicating, hopefully to the benefit of our members, and trying to just be the conduit for those small carriers who don't have the resources or the time to spend doing it themselves.
Well, and I think I've just been so impressed by SCTA and all your peers throughout the country in the level of communication that and the level of information that you've shared with your members. And I do think that's been a critical link for keeping folks informed on, you know, regulatory issues and just practical issues. You know, hey, our drivers are reporting that this rest area is closed. Can you communicate with the state DOT to get that facility back open because we need it?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time communicating regularly.
And I think we reflected on the trucking industry as a part of this because we were those first line responders. You know, everyone suddenly realizes what we've been saying for years, which is professional drivers are key to keeping this economy moving and literally bringing life-saving supplies for all of us during this. Jamie, have you felt the love while you've been out there during this?
Yeah. You know, you see a lot of signs out there. Thank you, truckers. Thank you, essential workers. I've had several people thank me here and there. A few honk on the horns driving by. But yeah. Good.
Casey, are your drivers feeling it from the general public?
They did. They felt it a lot during the heat of it. And I don't know, I think they're very weary of how long it will last, as am I. I can already, just being out on the road myself, you could tell people haven't driven in 2 months. So I know that they're feeling that as well. So they did, I was proud, I'm always proud to be, you know, be able to work with them, but they, you know, it was kind of their shining moment. And they loved, they might have complained a little bit, you know, about being so essential that we were putting them into harm's way or the dramatic ones would say sometimes, but they liked being, being appreciated for once.
And Taryn, before I move on to sort of what we can expect going forward, this would be a great time to plug SCTA's wonderful T-shirts and hats.
Yes.
Or Thank a Trucker.
Yeah. So we have lots of recognition programs going on right this minute. We've got the Thank a Trucker through the Southern Tide Company out of Greenville area. You can get those. They have the really pretty emblem that's just like our Truck Proud logo. All of the profits from that are put back into our foundation. At the end of all of this, we hope to turn around and use that money to promote the industry and support those who have gone above and beyond. So if you need information on that, we'll be happy to send it to you. I will say, I want to take one second just to plug like our relationship with the DMV and the governor's office, state transport police, et cetera, throughout all of this. They've been true partners in making things happen and easing business processes throughout, just to assist the trucking industry.
No, I think there'll be real, and I hope this opportunity to sort of thrust all this in the spotlight will really nurture this throughout once we're back in operations to normal, because I think we'll all benefit from that. I mean, I think the industry has always had a good relationship with their partners in regulatory agencies and law enforcement, but I think just the sort of we're all in this together that we're feeling now, I think will really heighten that and hopefully bear fruit for us going forward. So let's talk a little bit about going forward. I'm going to share my screen again. And you all know, I'm confident, because South Carolina always has good response to this, that every year ATRI does a survey of the industry to figure out what are the top issues of concern. And we launch this survey every August. We collect responses in August and September, and then we release the results every October. And so these are the top industry issues from last October. The number one issue, of course, was the driver shortage. The number out to the right of each issue is how it ranked in the previous year's survey. So driver shortage was number one. It was actually number one for 3 years in a row. We had 2 new issues on the survey last year. Driver compensation came in at number 3, and detention or delay at customer facilities also came in as a new issue at number 4. Those are the overall issues. This is what it looks like when you break out the responses from professional drivers versus motor carriers. For drivers, it was compensation, hours of service, and truck parking as their top 3. Whereas on the motor carrier side, it was shortage, retention, and hours of service. So let's talk a little bit about those going forward. And first and foremost, the driver shortage. I personally believe, and because I'm an optimist, that the fact that because so many Americans are now unemployed as a result of businesses shutting down, and because there's been such a positive spotlight shown on the trucking industry, I believe that's going to translate into positive, raising our ability to recruit folks for this industry. Casey, any thoughts on that going forward?
I would agree with that. I would like to think that the positive light that was shown on drivers will have a huge impact on the men and women coming up that choose not to go to a 4-year college, or that just have been interested in it, but not wanted to make a decision yet. I think that as long as they're not regulated so much, and we give the kids a chance to actually get in a truck, then I think it will have a good impact.
So Jamie, on the driver's side, it was compensation, hours of service, truck parking. Now, we know that we just got some regulatory relief in the hours of service rules. Well, we had regulatory relief during the pandemic if you were hauling critical supplies, but we're getting, through the new hours of service rules, we're getting some additional flexibility. So we may see hours of service as an issue not rank as high, but things like detention and truck parking might not have necessarily disappeared during the pandemic. You talked about parking was even more challenging. Our survey respondents found the same. What do you think going forward those issues are going to look like? And is there anything we can take from our experience in the pandemic to help improve things like detention or the lack of truck parking going forward?
Truck parking, I think maybe the states could do a little bit more, adding more facilities. There's a lot of just truck parking, but there's no actual no running water, no toilets, not even porta potties or anything like that. Also maybe make it easier for these other companies to bring in more truck stops. I'm not sure if there's any regulations or anything. Just try to do the best. Truck parking though, maybe, let's see, compensation, right? So driver compensation. Me on my end, it's I kind of get paid a per day rate. I can't really add into that the whole per mile as far as hours of service as well. Hours of service, to me, they got, if you're hauling, obviously essential materials like groceries, water, those got extended, and that was nice. But yeah, again, what was the other issue again? I'm sorry. Detention
at facilities.
Now, detention at facilities, a lot of these shippers, receivers, I think should be held more accountable. A lot of times we're given a set time to go there. We get there, we're on time, we're ready to go. But at the same time, they'll make you wait, 1-2 hours before you get into the dock. And also the length of time it takes to load the truck. I've sat there getting loaded for 5 hours before, when it should have only taken an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it really does push the hours of service, because then I have to worry about where am I going to shut down, ELDs. I mean, something you can do about it. Your time is your time, your start time, your end time. So it just creates a lot of stress. But I think that the shippers and receivers should be held accountable in some way, shape, or form. Not just so if we're late, that's it. See you later, reschedule. But there's nothing on them. I think something should happen about that.
So Casey, we heard from a number of fleets that yes, there was less congestion, so that part of the supply chain was more efficient, the reduced traffic congestion during the pandemic, but actually the detention situation was worse because at many instances at those facilities, they had load and unload. Did you all experience worse detention during the pandemic? Are you seeing it get better? Is it getting worse again? What was your experience?
Our detention stayed about the same. It was a little worse due to furloughed employees or parts of the distribution centers that had been shut down, but not a huge difference on it. The congestion, of course, was a lot less, which increased speed. My drivers had an increase on their speed, not a terrible amount, but enough for me to give a second look to them. So, but I think the detention other companies, of different sizes, I'm sure.
List was the economy, and I think we'll see number 1 was the driver shortage and number 10 was the economy. I think it's safe to say, and you would probably hear this from your members, that we'll see those two issues greatly change in their ranking in the 2020 survey. I think in terms of the driver shortage, I think it'll come back. We're still good when freight levels return to normal. We're still going to need all those drivers. But as I said earlier, I am optimistic that we will be able to have a little easier road recruiting drivers because of all the attention that's been paid to the truck industry. But there are concerns about the economy and sort of, how long it will take us to return to normal. Thoughts on that? Oh, you're on mute.
So sorry. I was going to say, we've been working closely with the state technical programs and also the private schools, and a lot of them had to shut down based on an executive order from the governor. So I was having a conversation with the DMV this week, and they're like, "Oh, well, we don't see all these CLP tests being filled or the CDL skills tests being filled." And I had to explain to them that basically there's a clog in the pipeline right now. So all those people that were in school or getting trained have kind of hit pause. And until we could get the training back up and running, we weren't going to see those numbers pick back up. So, we have a lot of companies who are saying we're still getting applications in, and we don't have the jobs to give them right this minute. Now that freight is ticking back up and things are starting to return to a more level playing field, and then the schools are going to start their training again. Hopefully that pipeline will start flowing, and I'd like to see, with your optimism, Rebecca, I'd like to see more people getting into the trucking industry. And I agree too with Casey. We need opportunities for those who are entry-level drivers or 18 to 21-year-olds. We need the insurance carriers and the insurance companies and the carriers to work with us to get them hired so that we can be
so Casey, when things get back to normal, whatever normal looks like, what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be? Is it going to go back to being the driver shortage, or do you think you'll
We've been different on the driver shortage issue as well. The years that it's been in the top 5, and especially the past 3 years that it was number 1. There's about 2 of those years that it was actually our number 1. Just because we're it's a small company, our drivers are home every day, which is what seems like the newer generation of drivers want to be. They want to be home with their families. Our biggest issue, once things get back to normal and the new normal, whatever it is probably going to be insurance cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's by far the very of companies our size. And attention is, that's always an issue, and it always has been. I don't have a solution for it. I agree with Jamie that the shippers and customers need to be held responsible, but I don't know who can be that responsibility holder.
Right. Well, Casey and I did not set this up, but it's a nice plug, so I appreciate that, Casey, when you mentioned insurance costs, because that's one of the things we document in ATRI's annual operational costs of trucking. And in fact, in just the past year, we saw among the participating fleets a 12% increase in the insurance premium cost per mile, and an even higher percentage increase over just the past 5 years that we've been doing that data collection. So I would strongly suspect that in this year's report, we'll see that 12% go even higher as fleets start to report their cost per mile for 2019. So just a plug for everyone who's watching us today, that data collection is open for ATRI. We are looking for as many fleets to participate as possible. We have 1 truck operators to 1,000+ truck operators who provide data for us in that operational cost of trucking. The form is available on our website at truckingresearch.org, and so I hope you will participate because it does help the industry document and benchmark where we are seeing these cost increases, like in insurance. And it gives fleets a benchmarking tool so you can see how your, for instance, insurance costs per mile stack up against fleets of your same size, the industry at large, et cetera. Q&A opportunity for the viewers or not? You're on mute.
Sorry, I do that. I don't see any questions in the chat boxes right this minute, but we're happy to answer anything.
Jamie, any final comments before we close out today?
No, not really. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to Jenny James and my safety department, and my boss Josh Cagle for giving me this opportunity to talk with you guys. Yeah, if you have anything else, I mean, any more questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. But that's about it.
Great, thank you. And Casey, thank you. Any closing remarks on sort of what the future looks like? And
things are looking up, a lot more up than they were, and so I think that we'll be back pretty full force by third quarter. That's what it's looking like. So I think that is a positive, and just
positive stories like that. We all want to see the trucking industry come back strong this year and into the future, because we do serve such a critical role in the supply chain. Taryn, thank you for this opportunity. I love to talk about ATRI's research, and I love to sort of ground truth it.
We really appreciate the three of you being here and taking time out. And as we were saying, you know, Zoomitis might be real, but we're glad that we're able to bring everybody together as best we can and provide this information to our members. We have one more webinar this week. It's the South Carolina quotes. So hopefully we'll see most of you on that. Jamie, thank you for taking a pause and hanging out in the TA for us. Casey, it's
not a problem.
And Rebecca, we'll see you hopefully back in person at the beach sometime in the near future.
I hope so.
I do want to take a quick second and just remind you that this week was hosted by the South Carolina Trucking Association's Truck Fund, and our sponsors are McGriff Insurance Services, Carolina International Trucks, Omnitracs, the Bunch Truck Group, Christopher Trucks, Excel Truck Group, the Pete Store South Carolina, and Worldwide Equipment of South Carolina. Thank you. Y'all have a great day.